episode number 4 of the Joint Operations Podcast. And
Hi.
I'm going to say it first. I'm Brady J. Sadler, one of your hosts. With me,
I'm Adam Sadler.
as always.
What?
Go ahead.
No,
I was going to say, with me, as always. I was trying to interrupt you each time you tried to speak. So.
Oh. Is it just, I don't know if it's just me, but that intro seems bassy.
No, it's...
So I apologize if it's too
bassy.
It's
got a lot of bass.
It's a problem when you let the bass, someone who's a bassist do the mixing. And
you're also wearing headphones. I think headphones make it
No,
more
it actually sounds better on my headphones than it does in my car. So that's why I was asking.
Well, we're going to let the hammer fall. It's fall, and this episode is going to be a lot about Warhammer because we thought it'd be kind of neat. We both like podcasts that are kind of like retrospectives, like, you know, the Always Sunny podcast where they just talk about episodes and they go through seasons, and there's the Office ladies, you know, all these podcasts. We don't have that much content to go through, but we have like 13 or 14 core designs we could chat about. So we knocked one out with Walking Dead, but we're going to backpedal now and we're going to talk a little bit about our first design, but we'll get to that. First off,
well, our first joint design.
Our first joint operation. First off, I'd like to do a new segment at the start of an episode. It's guys' gripe session. What's bothering us as
Brady did not clear this with me, so this is all new to me.
No, I just wanted to, because I came off of a book signing at Barnes & Noble in Noblesville, Indiana, which is my new hometown here. It was cool. The manager, got a stack of books for me to sign. Had some friends come out and hang out with me. It was really cool. It was really awkward though, because like people are so scared to approach an author at a table if it's not something they already know. So like I didn't get a lot of new faces coming up to me. So that was fun. I got some of my book on the shelf, so it's cool. But my gripe is, we have millions of listeners. We have like the number of listeners we have is like in the stratosphere.
Let's say potential listeners. There's millions of potential listeners.
We have a lot of listeners out there, but I haven't made 1 million book sales on my book. So like everybody listening here clearly hasn't bought my book yet. And it's like came out last week, This is Tuesday, September 2030th, right? I don't know.
2030th.
2030th, yeah.
It's the 29th.
Well, we're recording 29th, but this comes out in
October
2 days.
1st.
October 1st. So it's the 1st of October. So you guys have had a week to buy my book. And those of you who did, thank you so much. We had an awesome release. We broke 2 top 10 lists on Amazon. And the book I'm speaking about is Relic Myers and the Rhythms of Ruin, if you don't know. But if you're listening to this show, I'm assuming you know, because we have millions of listeners and you all are very informed people. So that's my gripe.
Maybe that second point was true, but I don't know about millions. We have tens of listeners, maybe.
So that was my week, was since our last episode dropped, is I've been doing a lot of marketing, and I'm finally to the point now where I think I can kind of like step off of marketing mode, even though I know it's still important to market this thing, but I'm more excited about working on the next book in the series, which I've been focusing on. So that's my my new step.
I don't think people are scared to approach authors, or when you mention that. I think a lot of people are more like me, where they are curious about something, but they don't want to be sold stuff. So
I get that. Yeah.
I'm hesitant. Like, for example, if I go to Gen Con, if I see something interesting at a table and there's somebody there sitting at the table, I'm less likely to go look at it because I don't want that person to try to sell it to me. I just want to check it out on my own, on my own.
This is a funny philosophical thing, probably, or a psychological thing, not philosophical.
Dude,
but
your cat is
he's really excited.
Climbing.
Yeah, Loxley is really friendly. Anyway, I think the thing that bothers me is like my curiosity always overpowers that. So to give you an example, I saw one guy at Barnes & Noble yesterday, and he had a cool Metallica shirt on. Not like a mainstream Metallica shirt. It was a niche one. It was like cool art. You could tell he's a big fan. And he cast a couple glances at my big Relic Myers banner of a metalhead drummer with a ghost. And I'm like, he's got to have some curiosity of what that is. But like, he was there for 30, 40 minutes with his significant other, and not once came close enough for me to say, hey, nice shirt. So like, that bothers me, because it's like, if it was me, I'd be like so curious I couldn't resist checking out what it was.
We might have to have a whole episode devoted to you classifying Metallica shirts, because I don't know what class is like classifies as a mainstream Metallica shirt.
Because there's like Master Puppets, there's like the album art, and there's like modern ones, but this one was like a really retro, like their old school art. It was a newer shirt, but it was
it the one with the toilet in the middle up your ass?
Not that. That was still mainstream, I think. So anyway, yeah, that was my recent endeavors. And you've been job hunting. That's new, right? That's new for you.
Yeah, that's super fun. I actually By the time this releases, I will know whether or not I got this job. I'm supposed to hear back on Monday, potentially, about this job that I went through four rounds of interviews plus like a coding assessment where I made an app to, a sample app for them to check out. And it all went really well. So the next time we do an episode, I might be very happy or very sad. We'll see. But
Pop your champagne corks. That's what it is right now because it's Tuesday.
I will comment on the Discord with the news. If you're not on the Discord channel, we actually started up a Discord channel for the Joint Operations Podcast. It is being run by someone that Brady knows.
Yeah, Nathan
Nathan is setting that up. And
Nathan's listening. He can comment in the Discord as well because he needs to remind me if we've met. I forget if we've met because it might have been at Gen Con, but
Brady's a big deal. He knows a lot of people.
He's
met so many people.
I have a lot of Facebook friends, and a lot of them came from when we were networking a lot during Blacklist and marketing. So I think that's when we bumped into each other, but he's also in like the metal drummer group I'm in. He's in the horror book group, the fantasy book group. So we have a lot of the same interests, so we overlap a lot online. So yeah, thanks Nathan for helping me set up that Discord because I do not really. I understand Discord, but like I don't keep up with it at all, and I don't like know how to classify all these channels and stuff. So I'm still learning that side of things, but it's up there. So
fortunately, ours is not that active right now, so it's not hard to keep up with the conversation going on in there. Mostly just people saying hi to each other. Yeah,
you are begging these millions of people listening to just inundate you with stuff to keep up with on Discord now. So you guys heard it here. Go bother Adam on the Discord just to make him feel like an idiot for saying that.
I already feel like an idiot.
So I'm still sweaty because we were. Go ahead.
Anyway, what I was going to say was I will maybe if it's good news, I'll leave a comment in the Discord saying, "Hey, I got the job."
Yes.
Otherwise, I'm going to be depressed looking for jobs again.
And there's probably plenty of Tim Robinson gifts to reply to that with. So bring your best.
Quit fucking with it.
I was gonna say I'm still sweaty because we were just before we started recording this, we were actually just tracking the rhythm section for the Alternus song that we're doing for the Unknown Oath fake band. We started with Brian Callanan, who was the audiobook narrator for Relic Myers, and it's coming along. It's pretty cool. I've had a lot of people asking, well, not a lot of, I've had a few people asking like what the status is of that song. We've kind of gone back and re-recorded a lot of the parts, so we're still getting the structure down, but it's been a fun process. So hopefully in the next week or two, we might have something to actually maybe tease and show. But Adam's always against me showing things early, so because I always do.
Nobody wants to hear stuff in progress, man. I want to hear the final product.
I had several people when I posted the little just of me playing that drum part. They were like, "That's so cool." They were like, "So cool seeing like behind the scenes stuff." So people like it.
They're trying to be nice. They're trying to be nice to you.
Well,
admit it, everybody. You're being nice to them.
I feel flattered. Keep being nice to me. Thank you. So yeah, let's talk about a lot of stuff in tabletop because right now.
Well, before we get into we have our categories, but since this is a Warhammer themed episode, we can talk about how we got into Warhammer and how it influenced pretty much our whole lives.
But the way that we've usually done it is we have like a segment of tabletop updates, a segment of video game updates, and we have like our core content for the episode, which is like tail end.
Like, I didn't think so.
Like last time's episode was all metal themed, and we did like the tabletop stuff, the video game stuff. Then we tied a big metal discussion about our history.
Yeah, but I guess since this is Warhammer, so we'll do an intro of Warhammer, our introduction to Warhammer.
You do what you want. Go off the rails and do whatever you want.
So anyway. Anybody who's heard Brady and I talk about our origins into tabletop games has probably heard this. I'm not sure. But many years ago, I think we were 8 or 9 when you got that Christmas present.
I want to say like
12 maybe?
Maybe 12, I think. Yeah.
Well, Brady got a copy of Hero Quest for Christmas one year. I don't even remember if you asked for it.
No, I didn't know what. Maybe I did because the commercials were playing a lot.
Yeah, the commercials were very exciting for us. But Brady got that, and it was really cool because it was we played like Clue and 13 Dead and Drive and Sorry, all these other board games are just
Was Mutant Chronicles before that or after that?
I think it was after.
Yeah, it's probably after.
Because we thought it was like similar to it. But Brady got that, and then we got excited because you could assemble little cardboard furniture and had all these miniatures and stuff. It was like a whole new world of gaming for us.
It was the dollhouse for boys.
Yeah, our mom actually had a dollhouse that she furnished and stuff, and that's kind of like a hobby of hers, and we always used to play with our action figures in that dollhouse. So this was kind of like, oh, there's a dollhouse that we can play a game with. So we pretty much dove right into that, and we got really into Hero Quest. It was pretty exciting, and it was like opened our eyes to a whole new world of gaming. But anyway, we kind of played it casually over the years, and then one day we were bored with our neighbor friends, and we were like looking for a game to play, and we wanted to play Hero Quest, but some of the later quests seemed like it needed more monsters than we had miniatures for, and we're like, oh, we need this expansion. So we decided to go to the game store, even though this game was out of print for years. Maybe they'll have old copies because we were so naive about how games were stocked.
Well, yeah, but we were like I want to say we were like 14 or 15. 15, okay.
Yeah, that's what I said years later.
Okay.
So we decided to go to the Game Preserve, which is a local game store, and said, oh, maybe they'll have some old copies sitting in the back or something. I don't know why we thought that. But went there. Obviously, they didn't have any Hero Quest because it was out of print for years. But they had shelves and shelves of this game called Warhammer. And it was like, oh, these miniatures look like Hero Quest miniatures, like, you know, the orcs and the elves and stuff. And we got really excited looking at it. So I bought a unit of Empire Militia, and I think, did you buy anything that time?
Well, I think at the time, I forget if I had to special order it because they were still not doing the Wood Elves yet. Like they didn't do like the re-release of the Wood Elves. So they had that like one box of like the Wood Elf archers that were standing there, you know, stoically with their bow, and it was all the same model.
Yeah.
So, but I think
and they were metal too.
No, I think they were plastic.
Really?
That box was, I think. But it was like an it had different branding, so it was like the older expansion. So like I felt like
this was basically when they were starting to convert all the armies into 6th edition. I believe that's the edition we got into it. It was basically the red box with the orcs and the Empire. That was the edition that we got into Warhammer. But we immediately got some miniatures. We got some paint. We started painting terribly. I wish I still had some of these old miniatures I had because I painted horribly, but I'd love to see how I've progressed over the years. But yeah, we kind of got into Warhammer that way. I remember we put like a felt cloth over the kitchen table with some bowls underneath it for hills.
Yeah. Upside down bowls.
We tried, fumbling through the rules as best we could.
I had a girl that was interested in me because we were working at Payless grocery store at the time. And there was a girl that was interested in me, and she came over to hang out, and like her and her friend would make fun of us like relentlessly because we were like gathered around with our bandmate Josh at the time, and we were painting miniatures in the room on our card table, and they were like just cracking up, and we're like, "What's so funny? This is awesome! Like what we're doing is awesome." I didn't understand the mockery.
Yeah, I think that was the first time I ever encountered anything where it was like making fun of somebody's nerdy interests or whatever.
Because it's funny because like I didn't even acknowledge that was like a nerdy pastime. Like I didn't know it was so new to me that it was like, what's so weird about this? We're just painting miniatures.
Yeah, the movie The 40-Year-Old Virgin hadn't come out yet.
Yeah,
so. I guess that we got our neighbors into it as well. Like we had some neighbor friends who got it. I think what got me so excited about Warhammer was when people got into it, they could pick an army that appealed to them, and that kind of like they identified with that army. And so like, you know, I was playing Empire, but I was playing Wood Elves. We had a neighbor who played Orcs and Goblins. It was just cool to like collect your army and then fight each other. But that kind of opened the door to not just Warhammer, but also fantasy, because we got into D&D.
Yeah,
and
that was, well, D&D was like a little later, but like one other aspect of this show that I wanted to kind of touch on was there was a post that was yesterday, well, I guess on Saturday when this was posted, was HammerFall's anniversary of the Legacy of Kings and Renegade, which are two big albums. Legacy of King was their second album, came out in '99. That album was pretty much responsible for kind of messing with my entire life, like because I got it when we were, I think, sophomores. No, I mean it's juniors. We were going to be in seniors, the tail end of our junior year. But anyway, HammerFall was a huge influence on me. It's a big part of the Relic Myers book as well. But it's funny because I always think of HammerFall and Warhammer pretty similarly, because I already had that like kind of that seed planted in my head from our time with Warhammer, because we kind of took a break from it. We kind of painted some miniatures, we got into it, but because there was like a lag between editions, we kind of fell out of it for a little bit, even though we still have interest in it. But also
we didn't get into more time back then, which we probably would have played way more. But Warhammer requires a lot of miniatures. Like it's a big army game, and not only do you need to paint them up yourself, but you need to find other people who have them. So we kind of went in and out with Warhammer. I think
I think the important part was like because it like struck this chord with me, because like fantasy, in quotes, fantasy, the genre, was still kind of new to me. Like I knew like what medieval stuff was, but like I didn't use the term fantasy very often. But like Warhammer Fantasy kind of planted that in my head. Like this is what fantasy is. I'm into fantasy, and I got this. I think I was skipping school junior year because I was kind of a loner. At lunch I'd sit by myself on a bench and with my garage jacket on and just try to be like a cool metalhead guy by myself. But I skipped school, went to the local CD store, which is called CD Land, like a pawn shop, and they had video games and CDs. But like I found this random HammerFall album on the shelves, and it looked like a Warhammer box. It had like these heroes like on the back, and I was like, oh, this is like heavy metal, but like fantasy. So that was opened a lot of doors for me. It kind of got me into that genre, but I think it was Warhammer's fault that like really awoke that fantasy need we had that we didn't really know yet, but kind of put terms to it.
Yeah, and this was, I think, after we graduated high school. We did not go see like the Lord of the Rings movie in theaters, but we were hanging out at Dad's house with Robbie, our guitar player at the time, and we just decided we watched the DVD or something, and like kind of blew our minds. Like, wow, this is like Warhammer, on the screen, on the big screen. And so that kind of opened our eyes to Lord of the Rings as well. And obviously, like I said, it goes into D&D and all that stuff. But Warhammer was really like the catalyst for us. Well, Hero Quest into Warhammer.
Yeah, but I mean, I always consider Hero Quest sort of like a subsidiary of
Hero Quest. had Warhammer inspirations for sure. But yeah, we went through lots of phases of Warhammer, just like kind of liking it casually. But then after we graduated high school, we were living with our twin friends we rented some house, and we really got into Warhammer. Like I was playing High Elves, Mitchell was playing Dark Elves, Justin was playing Orcs and Goblins, and then Tomb Kings. But we all lived together, so we painted up our armies. We had big game days or whatever. I remember for the 4th of July one year we decided to have like a 2-on-2 team game. I think our buddy Chris had Chaos.
Yeah, Chaos. Yeah.
I still remember he turned his Chaos Knights, a single line of Chaos Knights, to the side, and his flank was exposed to my high elf bolt thrower, and I just shot one bolt and pierced his entire rank of Chaos Knights, and that was like the core of his army. It was like one of the. I still have that visual in my mind.
I vividly remember back when we lived with Dustin, our buddy Dustin. He had Chaos, I believe.
Yeah, he played Chaos.
So like the one time we played, because I had Wood Elves, and obviously Wood Elves are all just about range, just shooting as many arrows as possible. And his Chaos Knights were just trugging along, trying to get across the map, and I was just like pegging him with arrows, and he's like, "These guys suck."
Even worse though was when he was playing Mitchell, and all that was left was his Chaos Knights, and Mitchell had a Dark Elf sorceress, and she could just run away and cast spells, and he couldn't catch her. He's like, I can't do anything. He got so mad. But yeah, we had all of our friends that we could get into Warhammer to waste their money. Games with us.
It's funny too because we knew about 40K was bigger. I think it was always bigger, but we just never really got into 40K till you were into 40K for years, but it's only been like the last couple of years for me. I've actually shown an interest in 40K, and spending every day playing Space Marine 2, and right now waiting for Kill Team. It feels very bizarre because I've always just been a fantasy guy, and especially Warhammer Fantasy. I think like the big transition, which this is jumping around a lot, I know, but the getting to work on Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay when I was just out of college, that was like a big turning point. And it's funny because the reason I wanted to bring up Warhammer is because it's got its teeth in like every aspect of our lives throughout, like when we were developing teens, and then like our careers, and like now just for recreation. Just it's always been Warhammer. It's always been around. And I think like talking about our first co-design, Warhammer Quest, because this is a tabletop themed thing, since we're still kind of in the tabletop segment, we could talk about like how we ended up designing Warhammer Quest. Some people might find it interesting, like the series of events that lead up to how you get your first contract, how you first get your own design, and like the behind the scenes stuff of that.
I guess leading up to the first step of that is the fact that you got your first job in the tabletop industry at Fantasy Flight Games, because of Warhammer.
Yeah, that's because the guy we were talking to, the guy I was talking to, Jay Little, he's got a huge Warhammer background. He was working on, I think, 2nd edition Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, which
third.
I know third was at FFG, but he worked previously. He worked for the 2nd edition because he's worked for a lot of RPGs. But they call it Warfup, which I've never really Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. But I remember vividly, I was like scrambling for any writing jobs because I just graduated with a creative writing degree from Purdue, like a moron trying to get a writing job somewhere. But I was working as a security monitor, so like I would sit in the basement of this like locksmith shop downtown Lafayette, and I would monitor security alarms. That was a night shift. I'd work overnight. So during the day, I would just try to find jobs, and I loved Fantasy Flight games. We had been playing a lot of Fantasy Flight games with our friends, but they had this open submission thing on their site where they didn't have a lot of job postings, but they would say, hey, we're always looking for freelance writers. So if you're interested, email us. And I had done that several times before, but I always did it in a jokey way because I wasn't very professional back then. I would just say like, hey, I'm probably not good enough for this, but here's my stuff. So people don't respond to that, you know. But this point in my life, I was getting it to be more professional. So I sent them like an actual sample and everything. And we didn't know, but they had a Warhammer project in the works, which was weird because I don't think at that point, I mean, they did Chaos of the Old World, I guess, before then.
They had the Warhammer license, but we weren't really familiar with. We saw the book for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay at the comic book store, and we like, oh my god, there's so many careers to play in this game, and you could play as halflings. Brady was all excited about that, but that was second edition, and we had no idea that this new edition was coming out. And that announcement was probably one of the most exciting game announcements that I could remember being that excited about back then. Was like, wow, this role playing game with tokens and cards and all this componentry.
Yeah, that was my first experience with like NDA stuff too, because like it wasn't actually announced yet. So like when I started, what was it announced?
I think it was because you were excited about working on it because you were excited about the announcement.
Yeah, that's right. So, but we didn't. But I was working on products beyond the core game, so like it was really cool.
Winds of Magic, right?
Yeah, Winds of Magic, and then there was another one too, the religious one, which I forget what it was called.
Signs of Faith.
That was it, Signs of Faith, yeah. But yeah, that was kind of a controversial project when it came out because it was like very component based. It was like a board game almost.
Had custom dice, had tokens and cards. It was basically like a board game, trying to make a role playing game into a component driven board game.
Yeah, it was a beautiful product. Like
the box was huge.
It was like massive, and it must have been like over $100 for the actual core box. They had to end up repackaging it to make it more accessible, but that was a cool experience. So like I got to write for 2 or 3 projects, and I still have like my little Moleskine notebooks I used where I would just like write by hand all of my notes to work on the actual books. And after my 3rd project, I think it was, FFG was posting for a marketing content specialist or something, but it was basically a copywriter role. And I was talking to Jay Little, the editor, and saying, hey, I'd love to work full time. And that, fast forward a little bit, I ended up getting the job. I blew the first interview, didn't get the job, and then they had the same posting later on. So either the job didn't work out for whoever got it, or they just had another opening.
You blew it because you said you wanted to be a game designer. Like
yeah. Which I mean, I just ramble sometimes. So like, and not being good at job interviews back then. Like I was kind of expressing my enthusiasm for being, in game. So I think I said something along the lines where like, this would be a stepping stone to me being a game designer. And obviously they don't want that. They want a guy who's going to be writing about games, So I made that clear in my next interview. I was like, oh, I misspoke. I apologize. And I got the job. So that was my first step into the games industry full time. And then you came along shortly after.
I was still finishing up my last year of college because Brady started school early at Purdue because he was working as a janitor there. I'm not sure if you mentioned that or not, but like since you were working as a janitor at Purdue, you could get in classes early.
I had kind of rewinding a little bit, but yeah.
I had to go to Ivy Tech to get my grades, to the approved level to get into Purdue. So I was at a semester at Ivy Tech, then I went to Purdue. So he graduated a year before me. I was finishing up school, but the last few months of school, there was a job posting at FFG that Brady said, hey, check this out. It was a game producer role. And it sounded really cool. We went to go visit Brady in Minnesota over my spring break with my dad. And I told the company, hey, I'm visiting my brother out there, just so you know. And they said, well, why don't you come in for an interview since you're in town? So I interviewed in person early at FFG with the managers there. I thought it went pretty well. So I was really excited about the role, but I got back home, finished up school, and I got an email saying I did not get the job. And that was right when I graduated. So I was kind of like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I got no job. Well, I had a job, but I didn't have a career yet. So I was a little bummed. I moved into a new apartment with my girlfriend and just kind of went about my life there. But a few weeks later, I got an email from one of the managers I interviewed with, and she said, hey, one of our producers is no longer with the company. We were interested. You were the next choice for this role, so would you like the job? And I said, of course I would. So got out of my apartment lease. My girlfriend and I actually broke up because she didn't want to move to Minnesota. I just moved to Minnesota to work at FFG with Brady. But I was a game producer. He was in marketing.
Yeah, like I think it was marketing content creator or something along content specialist. Maybe I forget, but
it was kind of funny though. My first day at work was some kind of a party, and it was just like everybody was playing games all day. And I was like, wow, this job seems tough. I mean, it's like a cake and. But yeah, so I started my job there as a game producer, but I only worked in that role for like a few months before I got promoted to managing game designer, because I worked as a lead designer on Descent Second Edition, because I kind of really wanted that project. That's kind of what I was most excited about with FFG besides Warhammer.
As a funny aside, like we'll get deeper into like how this all transitioned into Warhammer Quest, but like when that happened, like I was in a really weird headspace, because like I got kind of bitter, because like I think I've always been like way more creatively driven to like, you know, be on the creative end, and I felt like I was stuck in marketing, where like, and I that's the job I got, you know, and like I retroactively it's like I was really good at it, so I should have enjoyed it more, but I was like, I want to make some games, but you kept like getting promotions, and I'm like, what the heck, what do I have to do over here?
I think it's because of the way I carry myself around other people.
Probably.
We're very different. Like you say what's on your mind. I'm a little more apprehensive with how I speak, and so people think, like I've been told this, where people think that I'm very methodical, but like also like deep, you know, you're thoughtful with how you approach things. I can't think of the word that someone described to me, but they you know,
conniving, right? No.
But I kind of try to make sure I know what I'm saying before I say it, in professional
I'm in a hurry. I'm in a hurry constantly, and I always want.
That's why you say the wrong thing in job interviews.
That's why I ramble.
But they did like me there, and I did good work, so I kind of moved up pretty quick. But it didn't last long, because I think I worked there for 3 years total. But in my third year, my girlfriend at the time was pregnant with our daughter, and we decided we wanted to move back to Indiana. So I decided to leave FFG and take a job in Indianapolis, and that's kind of, Brady was still in Minnesota working at a corporate travel company.
Yeah, as a proposal writer, or a writer for a proposal database. But the interesting like event I think that triggered, because I transitioned from marketing to game design like a year into that, you know, role. But there was a Gen Con, my first Gen Con as a full-time employee, which was like 2010, I think, Gen Con 2010.
2010 was my first year there.
Yeah, but that was my first Gen Con, like when I was a full-time employee, because I started in March, I think it was, of 2010. But FFG released this solo game. I think it was their first like real solo game. I think it was co-op, but it was very marketed towards solo. It was Death Angel, Space Hulk Death Angel, a card game. Because I think it could play it up to 6-player, but it was like almost primarily designed as a solo game. But I sat at Gen Con. I was in a marketing hall, like a side room, and I was just overseeing events, so I didn't have much to do. So I just broke out that game and I played it like over and over. I just became addicted to it while I was sitting there, and it was like this new thing to me, playing solo games. So that's kind of what triggered this whole like desire in my head for scalable solo co-op games, where it could be played just as well solo as it did co-op, and it just scaled organically. And luckily we were pretty close friends with Corey Kineska, the designer of Space Hulk Death Angel.
He was my boss.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there was a boss dynamic, but when we left FFG, we stayed in contact. But I think that experience playing Death Angel was kind of like the instigator for our discussions about Warhammer Quest, because we pitched it several times while we were there, like, because they don't take
anytime that somebody from GW was there, like some I know that was
Owen Reese.
I don't know Owen was there, but anytime anybody came like for licensing purposes or whatever to you know, I went to dinner with a few people because I was on the management team.
Real special. I didn't get invited,
but they always wanted to go to Indian food, and I didn't like Indian food, so I felt bad. I was like, I don't want anything.
I'll go Indian food. I love Indian food.
But every time I talked to anybody from GW, I just always talked about Warhammer Quest, because I loved Warhammer Quest, and I was like, you guys got to redo Warhammer Quest.
It's a holy grail.
Yeah. So there was that card game for Death Angel, and we were like, they should do something like this for Warhammer Quest, because Warhammer Quest is a perfect setting, like for a card game.
Because Death Angel, I mean, because Space Hulk was kind of like the sci-fi Warhammer Quest, you know, it was like it was one versus many instead of full co-op, but it still felt like here's the sci-fi dungeon crawl.
Yeah, it was before Blackstone Fortress was ever a thing.
Yeah, so FFG didn't have a lot of internal game pitches where like where designers would be like, hey, I have a game idea. It was more just you worked on project. You got assigned projects.
Yep.
There was like a schedule, and you got assigned what to do, and you know, there was always like, you know, 5 years worth of content to design for. So there was no need for ideas.
Yeah, and plus they always had lots of expansions for their games, and so a lot of times they needed to support their existing games instead of just doing new games all the time. So new games were more rare than expansions.
Yeah, so we had several internal documents where we would just like kind of have our ideas for Warhammer Quest, and we pitched it, and I think it must have gotten into Christian's ear or something, because when we left.
Well, I mentioned it to him. Christian, or the CEO at FFG, took me out to like coffee or something for my last day, just because he wanted to talk about, you know, why I was leaving and, you know, my time there and everything. And I did mention that, like, you know, I still was interested in game design, and I'd still love to maybe do something in the future with the company, you know, on a contract basis. And so I kind of left that door open when I left, and I forget if I emailed. I was at Yellow Pages Group. I was working as a manager in some cubicle, and I remember talking to Brady like I wanted to do a game, but I can't remember if I emailed him directly and said, "Hey, let's do this. Can we do this game?" Or if they reached out to me about it. I don't remember.
I seem to remember you getting an email, and I'm not sure like if this is disclosed or anything, but I remember you getting an email about just licensing stuff. It's like, hey, we have a Warhammer Quest license or something, we want to do a game for this, are you interested, or something. So it was I think it was like very offhanded, you know, just see if there's an interest there. But we were like, yeah, it's like our first gig together as designers, because we had designed a couple very, very basic prototypes for like a sci-fi game, and we were starting to dabble in like a dungeon crawly style game, I think it was. But when we got that email and we started having discussions about doing a Warhammer Quest card game, that was like our first real like serious attempt at designing a game.
I actually have the email right here.
Really? I delete all my emails.
Yeah, I did not realize I still had this, but it was basically back in 2013. I sent an email saying,
man, 11 years ago. Dude.
Yeah, I actually sent an email saying, talking about a Descent campaign. I said, hey, you know, I remember talking at Starbucks about the future of freelancing. You asked if Brady and I'd be interested in designing a Descent campaign. And now that I've had some time away from the project, I was kind of sick of Descent at that time. That's why he asked me, because it was kind of like my project. And then at being so far removed from games, I was like, I kind of miss games again. So I said, hey, we're probably, you know, got some free time. And then he replied back, is like, actually, do you still have an interest in that Warhammer Quest game that you told me? And I said, heck yeah, I do. So I think we met up at Gen Con and kind of hammered out a contract for that. And that's kind of what started that project.
Yeah. And that like the early design iterations of that were interesting, because we had a lot of concepts that just didn't really work, because we wanted like a big adventure-y game that went, you know, above ground and stuff. But like Warhammer Quest is very much like a dungeon game, you know. It's like we got to be dungeons, we got to be dark, and so we had to be really concise with it. But we had like these visions we wanted like the hint of a campaign. But we both agreed that there were so many campaign games. Even now, there's even like, it's just a saturation now. There's too many campaign games and nobody finishes them. So we wanted the campaign to actually finish. Like the goal was in sight. You just play like a few sessions and that was your game. So you had the feeling of progression, but it was consumable where you could, you know, finish it. You know.
I honestly, this is kind of jumping way ahead, but I honestly like how they did it in Heroes of Terranoth evolved, which was like the successor to Warhammer Quest, was that the progression was in the quest itself. That's cool. It's even more of a, you know, you got the progression during the quest.
Yeah, truncated version. Yeah. So we pitched several different versions, and we had a lot of ones where it had more tacticality, I guess you would call it.
We had one that had a token bag, I think.
Yeah. And there was tokens like face down, like we had like treasure tokens that were placed on enemies, and if you beat them, you see what it is. And
but also you draw enemies out of a bag. It's like a token.
Yeah, and because with the hero cards had like engagement zones on the cards. You had like the enemies were just placed on there to mark if you were like, you know, fully engaged or whatever.
I still remember being very embarrassed with our first meeting though, like with that project, because we were writing notes and documents and like, you know, preparing pitches basically, And when we met with Corey and Christian, they were expecting a prototype for us to play
like,
through. And
yeah.
like, whoa, we did not know we're that far along. So we felt like failures at the first
it's a
meeting.
learning process. But I mean, luckily, like when we got our stuff together, and like that's the hardest thing with game design that I've learned is you can, and this is the same with like writing books, like being a writer, being an author, is you can sit there and take notes all day for months and months, and you'll never stop, because like every time you take a note, you get more ideas for more notes. But until you start actually putting things together to, test, either like writing a chapter of a book or designing a really rough prototype to see if it works, like you're not going to make progress on that project. So you just got to like dive in, get ready to like fail and move forward. So that was a way I learned that hands-on, because we didn't have a teacher telling us, you designed some of Descent, with your committee on and the design team of Descent, but
fortunately that was also like, you have this rough concept of what the game is, and like, let's just build off of this. Warhammer Quest was something brand new. We had no idea what we were going to do with it. Lots of different directions to take it. I think at this time we were just doing this in the evenings after work, because you had just moved back to Indianapolis and you were working remotely as a proposal writer, and I was working at that cubicle job at the Yellow Pages group, and I think there's pictures of this in my tiny little apartment.
I was gonna say, I remember this picture of me looking kind of miserable, like slouched over with a beer, and I have my hands on my belly, just like, what are we gonna do with this thing?
Yeah, so it was a lot of late nights to get that together, and once we got the concept off to FFG, it actually changed quite a bit in development, because they wanted to strip down a lot of the decks in the game and make them those quest cards.
Yeah.
So those quest cards were originally just decks of cards, and anybody who's played our modular deck system games can just assume, they can guess how those functioned.
I'm not going to make this claim, because this happens. Like, this happens with every producer, every publisher. Like, these ideas kind of get shifted around. But it's fun. It's always funny to me, because before Arkham Horror LCG came out, I don't know if I never talked to Maxine or Nate about this, but I'm not sure of the origins, but they had that idea of those like kind of competing decks, where one quest deck, we had that in Warhammer
Like a
Quest.
book, like an open book.
We had like, here's the enemy's objectives, and they had like they could progress it, and here's the heroes, and whoever got to the end of their deck first won. That was the original, but they didn't like that, so they made it like a quest sheet. But then Arkham Horror comes out, and like, I don't know if somebody was like talking about an idea, or if that just came out organically like that, where we just happen to have the same ideas. But I was like, wait a minute. I was like, where did this come from? Because I remember this.
Yeah, it happens a lot. I mean, like I said, some ideas just don't work for certain games, and I think with Warhammer Quest they really wanted more of a little bit simpler of a game.
Yeah.
Because
production is like, cut down costs on cards and sheets, and
the way the quest sheets worked, I think, kind of was elegant.
Like, I liked it. Yeah. And that's one thing too that kind of set this. It kind of like made it difficult for us going forward to work for other publishers, because when you work with FFG at the time, things have changed since with Asmodee and everything. But when we worked with FFG, they pretty much wanted the entirety of production on their development on their end. We would just hand off the core design, and they would just develop everything in house. And it didn't matter if we care. They would like let us know about changes, but it wasn't like our call. It was their game now. So we handed off whatever we were working on, and they finished it. So
they don't like ask permission to do things.
Yeah, which is great. I mean, that's the good thing, because I think it's important, because when you're designing that stuff, you can lose sight of the fun. So like, having another team come in and take over and like refine it I think it's ideal. So when we worked for other publishers, like, we were kind of expected to do the design and the development. So that kind of created a rough transition for us, because we weren't used to having to do that. We were used to just like, here's the core system, we'll hand it off, and you can tell us what needs to be fixed, what you think looks better. We'll say, okay, it looks great, whatever. So we've had to do kind of both now. So we've kind of become developers in a sense.
It was nice though to go back to that with the reboot of Street Masters that Steamforge did. We worked with Sherwin and Steve, and Sherwin, Steve, and they pretty much handled all the development of the game. We gave them some ideas, but they were kind of just with it.
And luckily, I mean, that's a game that has the roadmap there, so it's easier to follow. It's more difficult with the new system, but if you have an experienced development team, that's what they're there for, is to learn it and refine it. So yeah, that was and then when that came out, I think it was. We designed it in 2013.
It didn't come out till 2015, I believe.
At Gen Con. Because I remember we had pictures of us at the banner at Gen Con, and it was like going to be released.
That was a very exciting release, because we had no idea what was happening with the licensing side of things. But apparently, unbeknownst to us, the GW license at FFG was going to be over.
Mm-hmm.
And that sucked because the game just came out, and this game was set up for tons of expansions. Like
Lots of halfling expansions.
it could have had all kinds of quest expansions and new heroes and stuff like that. And also for us, that just meant this is our first design, so we actually get royalties on something. This will be like a long, living project. It'd be great. No, it got 2 little POD hero packs, and that was it.
Yeah, POD was print on demand. It was a new thing they were trying, where they would print like whenever they sold a copy, they would print a new. So it was like very low print runs. But
I should also mention before, that was kind of jumping ahead, but when the game came out, it was actually received very well.
Yeah.
Like our first royalty check was pretty decent. There was quite a few, like they sold through their whole print run. They didn't do a huge print run, but they sold through it all pretty quick.
Yeah.
And it got great reviews. I remember the Dice Tower.
Gave it. Tom Vassell seemed to really like it.
Seal of approval.
Yeah.
Was it Seal of Excellence? Maybe.
I don't think he had that back then. I think he just gave it a good review. Like I think Street Masters was the first one that we had that got the seal.
But Tom Vassell seemed to like it a lot, which was really cool. It felt cool to actually have our first joint design out there that had well received, which is great.
And I think that was the start of like just a string of just unfortunate. I mean, as designers nowadays, you can't really rely on royalties. It's like I think it's changed so much because
especially
back in the
with
day,
Kickstarter, it's like you just do one big print run.
Yeah, because one of our mentors was Richard Lanius, and we're still working with him now, which is awesome. But he had his start with a big hit with Arkham Horror, so like royalties were a lot different, where you could make consistent royalties for like a decade, just like go like
especially with as much as FFG does with that type of Arkham Horror game.
It's an evergreen title, so like. That was more common, I think, but now it's like, I mean, maybe we're a good example of this, but we've only had like 1 or 2 consistent chains of royalties, where they consistently come in.
Yeah, usually if we did have royalties, a lot of times we would just take design fees, and then if it's a Kickstarter project, we're like, okay, well, let's just do a percentage of royalties from the Kickstarter, and that's pretty much it. Yeah. But like, I think for actual retail royalty sales, it was really only through FFG, I think, for Heroes of Terranoth and Warhammer Quest. And then, obviously, we're not getting into the business side of things.
The thing is like, it's because right now I'm marketing books, and books have a shelf life, where it's like I can sell books, and they consistently would give me royalties, but we can't say, hey, go support us and buy one of our games, because we won't see any money for any games out there. Like if you buy it secondhand, or if it's a game that's already in production but we don't have any royalties attached to it, we won't get any support.
I think the most recent one that we've helped in was with Earthborn Rangers. Is that another one that came out that I will admit that our design influence was more from the core, the beginning of the game,
original core,
and Andrew Navarro, who runs Earthborn, he had a specific vision in mind for this game, so we kind of tried to work with him to give him as much as we could about like the core foundation of the game, and then he brought in Andrew Fisher from who we worked with at FFG as well, and he kind of took over.
Which I think he's like design director now there, so he oversees pretty much all their design stuff. But
I would not call Earthborn Rangers a Sadler design, but we definitely helped with the core system, and we were involved from the beginning.
Yeah, helped iterate early on.
Yeah, and then we also had conflicting schedule stuff, so we couldn't, stay with it the whole way. So
yeah, and I mean, we had a similar, maybe not a similar one, but we had another collaboration with Arcane Wonders, which hasn't delivered yet. Hopefully it's going to deliver soon, but that's another Kickstarter, a big Kickstarter project we collaborated with Richard Lanius on.
Yeah, but since we were working at Blacklist, obviously we were limited to who we could work with, because I mean, we had the ability to freelance if we wanted to, but we were just always so busy with our own games,
churning out Kickstarter projects. And so that was our first, I didn't know it was almost, I mean, it came out almost 10 years ago. Next year will be 10 years, but we started designing it like 11 years ago. So
that was pretty much how Warhammer kind of like got us started and influenced our first big project together as game designers.
And it was my first real writing job at all, when I was writing for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. So that was so it's kind of been haunting us all along, and like we just spent all morning playing Space Marine 2. So, and we're waiting for that dang kill team to ship right now.
One more week. That kind of leads us to tabletop stuff though for Warhammer, which obviously is a huge category. But like besides the actual Warhammer game, like Warhammer Fantasy Battles, one game that was a huge influence to me. I played Hero Quest first, but Warhammer Quest was this game I found out about like when I was in college, and it was out of print, and I couldn't find it anywhere, so I bought a copy off eBay for like $300, but it was unopened. It was sealed, so I actually got to open up. This was from 1996.
Which, you want some water?
No, I have water.
Oh, I thought it sounded like your throat was going dry. So
Thanks. That's just my I have a gravelly voice. But yeah, Warhammer Quest was from 1996, and it was like a fully cooperative dungeon crawl board game set in the Warhammer world. And my main experience at that time was Descent. Journeys in the Dark was from Fantasy Flight Games, and it was, you had an Overlord player and then hero players, kind of like Hero Quest. And I was like, I love this idea of being able to play cooperatively without the need of a bad guy. I don't want a bad guy controlling the monsters. And so that was pretty much my biggest board game influence from Warhammer was that game.
Yeah, honestly, I think we were most excited about doing the card game is because we secretly hoped that it would like reignite this, fandom about the brand. Even though the brand has a huge following, we were hoping that like it did well enough where GW was like, oh, maybe we should do the actual Quest again.
Yeah,
when they did, I was like, no, not in Age of Sigmar, not that.
I regretted it because I didn't play it enough, so I ended up selling that copy that I had, and I also felt bad spending so much money on it because it was an out of print game. But years later, when I was living at your house, I decided I wanted it back. So I went to eBay and I bought it again. Plus, I found the Orc expansion, the Undead expansion, and I bought all those. And I was like, those are very rare. So I was very proud of that purchase. But again, we never played it. So eventually I felt bad, and I was moving again. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to go ahead and sell this to somebody who might actually use it. Fast forward to last year, I got the itch again.
Third time's a charm.
Yeah. So this time I bought it, and I'm keeping this one because I just want it as a collector's item, and I have a dedicated game space where I can keep it as even if it's just for decoration on my shelf.
You gotta give Little Monk a shout out.
I was gonna say that's what I was building up to. Was as I got that, I started. I follow this page on Facebook called Warhammer Quest fan page, I believe. But it's run by someone named Little Monk who has been keeping this game alive for years. We actually had Little Monk playtesting the Warhammer Quest adventure card game because I knew about it back then. Unfortunately,
he hated it. Right?
He didn't like. He actually talked to me about that. He apologized to me how bad he took it because I had to explain to him we were not recreating Warhammer Quest. This is just influenced by Warhammer Quest.
Very abstract version.
Yeah, it's not supposed to replicate the Warhammer Quest experience. But anyway, shout out to Little Monk because he keeps this game alive. He has all kinds of expansions and supplements, and he even does these professional print runs where people can sign on. He doesn't do this for like money or anything like that. He just has people sign on, and everybody chips in their portion of payment to pay for this professional print run. And he does this for expansion books. He recently did it for all the map tiles in the game, and now he's doing it for the hero rule books or warrior rule books, which I actually just got on. So I'm excited to get those. I think they're coming up pretty soon. But if you are a fan of Warhammer Quest, or if you've ever been interested in it, you can actually build your own copy of it now, thanks to Little Monk. He's keeping this game alive, and it's pretty much you can play everything. He has all kinds of downloads for free as PDF as well, if you don't want to pay money to print stuff out. So I would definitely encourage people to check him out if you're interested.
Yeah, I just want to see what he does with the halfling cook or halfling thief, right? He's got a little lunchbox.
I sent you that PDF.
I need the physical. But board game. Are you done with this? Are you done with Warhammer Quest? Or are you still going?
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to play it now, but
yeah, it's fine. I was going to talk about what I played recently because last night I got to actually play a board game. It doesn't happen as often as I'd like anymore, but I got to play a game that was sent to me by the designer. I apologize if I mispronounce your last name, Gordon. It's Gordon Kalea. Like I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but Gordon's an awesome dude. He actually interviewed me and Adam. Adam and I, he interviewed
Adam and me.
Yeah, me and Adam for his book that was all about like board game design and just board game publishing. So, and I forget the name of that. I should have looked up what the name of that book was. Google it while I'm talking. I don't know if you know the guy's name, but anyway, he designed a game called Fate Forge, which was a big Kickstarter project recently, or Game Found. I'd have to double check that as well. But Fate Forge is based on a RPG system that's pretty popular. And RPG campaign setting, and It's a app-driven board game where you play as heroes in this world, and the app is guiding the story and guiding the enemies, and a very elegant system. My wife and daughter loved the game. They're ready to play some more. It's a big campaign game, so it went over super well. People who know my taste probably know I don't love app games because I, for a brief time, worked with Lucky Duck Games on a fantasy game based on my fantasy book series, and it was all app-driven.
Was it Cardboard Lives? Was that the book?
That sounds, I don't know. It's Gordon Calais,
Yeah.
Calle.
But I was like, maybe that's what it used to be called. That's what the email said.
It might be. It's up on my shelf. I should have just brought it down with me because I'm an idiot and didn't plan ahead. But anyway, so yeah, I worked shortly with Lucky Duck Games because we were adapting a game idea, which was changing again. We have another version of it, but back then it was going to be an app game, and I'm not great with app games because I appreciate what they can do, but I don't personally love switching between my focus on the tabletop with an app. I'd rather just play manually with everything. But Fate Forge did a great job because it wasn't a lot of upkeep. The app just really kind of just guided the story. So yeah, really cool game. I suggest checking it out. Gets thumbs up from me. Is that all board game stuff? Because I got some video.
Yeah, I think I would just give a shout out to Games Workshop because they recently brought out earlier this year. They rebooted the Old World because the Old World was killed off back in 2015 for Age of Sigmar. It's extremely depressing. Lots of people are sad about it. Not going to throw shade at Age of Sigmar because people like it. That's great, but the Old World is sacred to a lot of people, including me.
Irreplaceable.
And so I'm glad to see it back in some form. So the Old World is now a game you can play. You can play your old rank and file Warhammer, but I really hope Games Workshop will either bring back a new version of Warhammer Quest, not like their current redesign, but like the original. Just reprint that Warhammer Quest would be great, or Mordheim. If they brought back Mordheim, that'd probably be one of my favorite.
I'd even take Underworld. Like I'll take anything in the Old World. Because like a lot of these Age of Sigmar games look cool, but like I have no connection. I try so hard, but I have no connection to any of that.
Well, something about Mordheim though, I think I just have always had this regret where we saw it on the shelf at the game store, and I think you pointed out saying this is cool. It's kind of like Warhammer, but
you said no.
It didn't have the Warhammer name on it, like the Warhammer logo. So I was like, "What? We already playing Warhammer. We don't need another game." But that game would have been great because you just need a handful of models, and we could have got way more people into it. And plus,
see, I have good taste. I know what I'm seeing. So.
And nowadays, I'm just more of a skirmish guy. I love skirmish games. So.
Yeah, I really hope that they branch out more with that brand. But I think even if we just get fantasy battles, Cubicle 7's also doing the Old World RPG. So that may not be enough for me, but it'll tide me over, I think. So
yeah, we did play a little bit of the 4th edition of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. We had a campaign going for the Enemy Within campaign, and that was probably some of the most fun I've had role playing. Like I was running it. I would have probably had more fun if I was the player, but that's a fun setting to role play in.
Yeah, they should do. Hopefully, because Space Marine 2 is doing so well, they might do like a Warhammer Fantasy video game, a Warhammer Fantasy role play video game someday. That'd be really cool, like an MMO.
Is that a segue to video games now?
Yeah, video games. Yeah, because I don't have much new with the video games. I've been playing Space Marine 2.
Well, I have some old stuff because one of the coolest Warhammer games we played was the Warhammer Online Age of Reckoning.
Yeah.
Which was an MMO set in the Old World. Really cool concepts. That game introduced the concept of public quests. Not only could I play as a warrior priest, I think you were playing as a witch hunter.
No, I was playing as a halfling thief.
No, not in your dreams, in real life. Warhammer Online Age of Reckoning was cool because I think there were 4 different races you could play. You could play as 6, because you could play as Empire, High Elves, Dwarves, and then you could play as Orcs, Dark Elves, and was it Chaos, or who was the third? Because there was Dark Elves, Orcs and Goblins, and the other enemy faction. I don't remember who it was.
Yeah, was it Chaos? I think it was, because I remember Chaos Knights running around, right? Like,
man, I can't believe I forgot. I never played the bad guys. I'm pretty sure,
because you'd be like a Chaos sorcerer. I don't know. We'll have to look that up because I'm curious now. But
you could look it up on your phone while I'm talking. But
yeah.
Not only did they have all those factions to play as, every race had 4 different classes. So there was lots of options for what you play. But the game had this really cool concept of public quests. So usually in MMOs, massively multiplayer online role-playing games, you would group up with people and you would go do quests together. And if you started fighting like a monster, it got tagged to be like your...
It was chaos, yeah.
It was chaos?
Because it was set up as dwarves versus greenskins, empire versus chaos, high elves versus dark elves.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then wood elves versus halflings. Oh, that's not in there.
That's not in there.
Oh, weird.
Brady, you're misremembering.
I remember being so annoyed they didn't have wood elves in there. I was like, how do they have high elves? Why can't they be just elves?
Yeah, I think
both?
eventually they would have done wood elves
Yeah.
and vampire counts, or wood elves and beastmen.
Yeah, probably beastmen. That makes the most sense.
But anyway, the way the MMOs worked was you had a group, and if you went to go fight an enemy, it kind of got tagged to your group. And so if it died, you got the XP and loot. If somebody else came along and tried to attack it, they wouldn't get the stuff. But Warhammer Online introduced this concept of public quests where, like, for example, we were playing the Empire area, some big giant would come by and start attacking people, and everybody in the area could go group together. They didn't have to group up, but if they were in the area, they could fight this giant together and bring it down. And this is something that has been in games all over the place now. Even Diablo 4 has this with world bosses and stuff like that.
But it's less cinematic. If that felt, maybe because I was at the time, but it felt so cinematic back then. Because you're just like running across the frontier and you see this huge shape. Like, oh, we got to go help the town over there.
Yeah, and playing as Warrior Priest was so cool. The only thing that I didn't like about the game, besides the fact that it got canceled, but it was very focused on what they called realm versus realm. So, which was PvP. The whole server would take part in these big PvP battles, and I wasn't that big on PvP, but also it got kind of clunky with that many people, and you would run into this big group of stuff and you would die like right away, and it was just hard to see what was going on. I didn't really enjoy it that much.
Yeah, it felt cool, but it was hard to contribute.
And if you didn't have a good player population, it was useless.
Yeah.
And I think when we were playing, the bad guys were way outnumbering the good guys.
Yeah, everyone wants to be evil in these games and play the bad guys.
That was probably one of the best old world games I played. The only other competitor I think would be the Total War Warhammer series. That is probably one of the best representations of Warhammer, the old world, in a video game. It is a real-time strategy war game, but it's got map control and taking over territories and managing your armies and things. It's very, very well done, and I think it's contributed to why Old World came back, was because those video games were so popular.
Yeah, it keeps the brand alive, that's for sure. And I don't play those games as much as you, but I appreciate the depth they have and everything. I want something more direct, more intimate, play as a character, and that's just really zoomed out, big campaign level stuff. But it is charming because it's Old World, so I can see the appeal. It's just not as much for me. It's
very high level, and it's also one of those games that just sucks away an entire day because it's turn-based. You do a turn, you move your armies. Oh, I'll just do one more turn. Oh, I'm going to do one more turn. And it just does that over and over again until you realize, oh, I've wasted 7 hours. So I've taken a break from that game because it was consuming too much of my time.
Well, I'm going to have to cut you off because we only have a few minutes left before the hours here, even though we don't have to be...
We don't have to be on...
Yeah, we don't have to be an hour. But just to keep it on track, we do have some questions that people submitted, and I want to make sure we address those because... we've been begging people to ask us questions, so let's answer some.
We didn't talk about the modern Warhammer games we're playing, though. Like Space Marine 2. We never talked about that yet.
We have on many episodes.
I'm joking.
Give me that. So we have Nemesis Nate, who's our buddy I mentioned before, is helping us run the podcast. He's asking, what books have you been reading, and what are some of your favorite books? This is easy for Adam. You can go first, because you don't have as many books, right?
I've been reading Kill Team articles, preview articles. No, I actually haven't been reading much because I've been more watching stuff. I just haven't had the motivation to read lately, so I haven't been reading very much.
I could go on for a while, but I'll keep it concise, I think. So what I've been reading is Stephen King's Dark Tower. I've read it before. I've read 2.5 books before, but I've restarted it because I'm preparing myself for Mike Flanagan's adaptation, which I think is it Amazon? I think he's doing it for. I forget. I think it's Amazon.
I don't know.
Yeah, but he's doing an adaptation, and I love Mike Flanagan. Like The Haunting Hill House is one of my favorite shows ever. But I'm on book 2 now, Drawing of 3. I churned through The Gunslinger, but I've been distracted reading a lot of indie horror stuff because I'm part of the Books of Horror group on Facebook, and I've been kind of promoting my book, but I've also just been helping, promote other indie authors and just checking out their stuff. So I've read quite a few of those. As far as favorite books go, I hate being like a broken record, but I always have to go back. Song of Ice and Fire, probably my favorite book series because I'm a big fantasy nut, and that's some of my favorite fantasy out there. But I think one of my favorite books in recent history was Stephen King's 11/22/63. I like a lot of Stephen King stuff, especially like It, one of my favorite books. But that 11/22/63, I've read that like 3 or 4 times. I don't know what it is. I don't really have a particular interest in the Kennedy assassination or time traveling, but it's something about that book just really, really gets me. And the James Franco Hulu show is pretty good as well. I'd recommend that. So thanks for the question, Nate. And then we had a couple more.
Now, if you want to talk about shows, I got plenty of things I've been watching.
We will talk about shows, but we got another one, though.
Why does your cat keep grabbing my arm?
Loxley is really starved for attention. Nobody will pet him. So we had a few questions on our Facebook page. So Ryan, my buddy, I think I always pronounce Ryan's last name wrong, so apologies, Ryan. It's Neaters or Naters?
I think it's Neaters.
Neaters, yeah, because I don't think I've actually heard him tell me his last name. I see him online all the time. We chat, so I always call him, hey, Ryan. But he's mentioned that he's been listening to a lot of HammerFall since reading Relic Myers, which is great to hear because that's what I was hoping for, is, you know, spreading the infectious music I listen to through my writing. But he was asking what our favorite song and favorite album are from HammerFall.
I probably would have to just say the first one I ever heard, which was Legacy of Kings, right? Because that one, I think that was on a mixed CD that somebody gave us.
No, I bought the album. I mean,
I know, but
that's the first time I ever heard it was when I bought it.
I could have sworn that it was on some mixed CD.
One time, Paul, our older brother Paul, mixed a bunch of power metal. It didn't have HammerFall. It had Camelot Until Kingdom Come. That was the first power metal song I ever heard, I think.
I remember something else where there was this
that's Heeding the Call. It's the very first song on Legacy of Kings. That's the first thing I heard, and I put the CD in. So you're probably thinking
we're not going to argue on the podcast, but I swear.
I'm not arguing, but it was. But I had never heard anything about HammerFall until I saw that album and bought it, and I heard it myself. Maybe you heard it somewhere else, but I'm pretty sure I showed it to you because I had it. So that
I would say that one, and there was also the Let the Hammer Fall, which was I think on the same album.
Yeah, that's what this episode is called, Let the Hammer Fall, because it's fall, it's autumn.
Yeah,
that's the thing. It's the first day of fall. I didn't realize either, or not first day of fall, whatever. It's first day of October, which is a fall month. But anyway, that is my favorite album as well, which is Legacy of Kings. My favorite song, though, even though I love Heeding the Call, my favorite song is actually Dreamland, which was like I was like, this sounds really happy when I first heard it, and I didn't know if I liked it. But the more I listened to it, I'm like, man, I love this happy song. It's like such a upbeat, happy song. So we had a comment from Kevin Sawyer on there as well, saying HammerFall is one of his favorite bands. Good old school cheesy metal. I love, the more cheese the better for me. And then Ryan had another question on there. He was talking about Hour of Need, and he was wondering if we ever thought that if we had our say, if we'd want somebody else to pick that up, like Steamforged picked up.
We actually just asked Steamforged, hey, get this game too, because we like this game. But yeah, I think that if we had our choice, probably just have them. I would rather Steamforged have all of our games.
Yeah, it'd be nice to be under one umbrella. But yeah, that's one that I would like picked up because I'd like to do other things with superheroes, and I loved a lot of those characters. Especially from the core game and from Jim and Icebox. Like, we had a lot of backstory written.
And also just that product model. Yeah. Like, the game could have been developed longer, I think, but like all the ideas were there, and the product model itself was just really, really cool product model.
Yeah. So those are our questions. Thanks for sending them in. We're always happy to chat about whatever topics you want to bring into the Discord or onto our Facebook pages. So now we can talk about what we've been watching lately. You want me to go? I'll steal yours probably, but
I'll go first then. So I've been watching a lot of things. But I mentioned this before, but I'm still watching Rings of Power every week.
I'm so behind, man.
The last week's episode was great. I think there's one episode left. I also finished up watching my Frasier marathon. I was watching the
I thought
Frasier.
You finished that last week.
Well, I did, but I don't think I talked about what I was watching. Since I watched it when I was going to bed, I needed something else to watch. So I started watching that Monsters show that was the Lyle and Alex Menendez story.
It's not Alex, right? It's Lyle.
Eric. Sorry,
yeah.
I don't know why I said Alex. Eric and Lyle Menendez. That was like basically season 2 of the first season was the Dahmer.
Yeah, Monster Dahmer.
Yeah, it was. It was pretty good.
Yeah.
Watched it quick, and now I just started watching the Mr. McMahon documentary, and I'm really enjoying it because I don't think we've talked about this before, but I have a soft spot for professional wrestling.
Well, we'll talk about it when we design a wrestling game, and then we'll do an episode.
I've always
about that.
tried, man. I've always tried, but that's tough.
No, I keep saying I want to write a fake like a book about wrestling in a world where it's like actually like real. It's like it's not like stage. It's like it's real,
Like
people
theatrical
feuding.
gladiator
Yeah,
combat.
it's like these ridiculous characters, and they're actually competing in this professional league, but it's all real. So like I think it'd be a funny book. But
Yeah, I've always liked watching professional wrestling growing up, but like wrestling documentaries are just fascinating to me. So
Yeah,
I'm enjoying it so far, even if I don't necessarily care for Vince McMahon.
yeah, the characters involved. That's the problem. Is like professional wrestling is fascinating, but the actual real people involved, it draws a lot of bad people out from to get the money and everything from that's available through wrestling. But you stole a lot of mine because I've been watching Monsters. The problem is we talk about what we watch so much of each other that like you mentioned the Vince McMahon show, like, oh yeah, I like wrestling, I'll watch that too. So I'm enjoying that. But I think the one I have been watching that you might not have been watching was actually no, you watched that as well.
What?
Did you watch Barbarian recently?
Not recently. I watched it like when it came out.
Yeah, I watched Barbarian again because it's on.
I was gonna watch
Amazon.
that with my daughter, who's too young to watch it.
Riley's too young to watch it, but she enjoyed it.
She wanted to watch the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but man, is it bad!
Yeah,
so she got really bored. Like, I don't want to watch it.
I watch a lot of slashers, but something about that particular franchise just kind of makes me feel sad.
Well, I mean, if you watch the '70s version, it's hard to watch.
Yeah,
it's old.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
really old.
So yeah, I need to catch up on stuff because I've watched a lot of the same stuff you've been watching, but I really want to watch other things. Like I want to watch Rings of Power, but I haven't got around to it. Been rewatching a lot of the same stuff. So I think that the only thing I've watched recently that you haven't covered was the Barbarian one.
Oh, I also started watching the Agatha show on Disney
watched
Plus.
that as well.
The first 2 episodes of that, pretty cool. I enjoyed it.
So nothing too exciting for me on the what you've been watching side of things, because I usually watch what Adam's watching if he tells me something cool is going on, because you watch more than me, I think. So I have to catch up.
I want to throw this back to any viewers out there, because we did actually get some questions, which
Millions.
are great.
We have millions of viewers.
Keep the questions coming if you want. But even again, on top of that, even if you have ideas for what you want us to have a whole show based on, like topics, we're open to that as well. We kind of just debated whether we want to just dig really deep into Kill Team when it comes out, and like,
we are,
because but we do have people that listen to this podcast maybe that don't play Kill Team, so I don't know.
They better start. That's the thing.
Maybe you should check it out. But
yeah, we'll have like a dozen more games to talk about of our own work, and then we'll see where we go from there. But maybe we'll just revisit topics and stuff. But anyway. Or we'll go to bi-weekly. That's probably what people really want, because then we'll get more viewers, because you leave them wanting more.
So then we go monthly after that.
Then we go monthly. Then we go an annual catch-up podcast.
One podcast a year.
So go buy Relic Myers, The Rhythms of Ruin. Help me.
I think all the viewers have probably already bought it. I mean,
if all the millions of viewers we have bought it, I would be done promoting it. I would just be writing the whole series full time, because I'd be a full-time author. So until that happens,
what if we just have one viewer who's a billionaire, and he can
that's fine too. You could buy 1 billion copies. You could buy it for all the people that can't afford it. So, because my books are expensive, right? No, they're not. They're normal. I have normal books. But yeah, thanks for tuning. Thanks for tuning in on us. Thanks for tuning in, and
thanks for downloading the episode and listening to it.
Thanks for reviewing it with that 5-star review, and thanks for saying all those kind things in the comments, and thanks for asking all those questions on the Discord, and thanks for joining the Discord. You guys are great.
You're very busy.
You guys do a lot of stuff. So. Stay tight, stick tight.
Have a good rest of your week.
Have a good night. Have a good night. See ya.
You really need to think about what you're going to say before you start talking.
What do you mean?